What is the forgotten adoption option? Many are aware of infant international adoption, where you hire an agency, often wait a long time, and spend tens of thousands of dollars. And then there's becoming a foster parent, where you may or may not adopt the children. But there is a third option, where you adopt children directly from the foster care system. I call this the forgotten adoption option. In fact, 30% of children currently in foster care are adoptable, and you don't need to be a traditional foster parent to adopt them. Hi there, I am Marcy Bursack. After blogging my experience adopting a pair of biological siblings through the foster care system, people started asking me to explain the process to them. And it's difficult to navigate, but the families I mentor feel that knowing the barriers, the challenges, and what to expect has actually helped them persevere and pursue their dream of adopting. And while I would love to have a really big family, adopting thousands of children isn't exactly realistic, but I can teach others how. Whether you're trying to figure out how to get started, you're battling some doubts and fears, or maybe you know someone who wants to adopt, I'm here with resources to help others discern if foster care adoption is the path for them. And if it is, I have practical tips and resources for them as well. You can find all of these resources, which include my blog, 3 books, an app, and a classroom lesson at ForgottenAdoptionOption.com. However you found this podcast, I am so glad that you did. I want to extend an invitation to you to reach out to me to ask anything on your heart. My goal is to help every waiting child be in their forever family. And that's why I host this podcast. Welcome to the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast. In this episode, we will learn how to give and receive support if we step into the foster care system. Hi, Jillana.
Hey, Marcy.
This is so exciting. Jillana Goble is an advocate, author, and speaker, as well as mom and nonprofit leader. We met through a mutual friend who insisted, literally kept telling us, you have to meet each other, because we both are authors doing important work on behalf of children in the foster care system. In preparing for this episode, I learned that Jillana and I actually have more in common. After college, Jillana moved to Guatemala and taught in an orphanage. And after college, I actually served in an orphanage in Moldova. So not the same country, but we both went to orphanages. And what's interesting is our unique experiences serving overseas led us both to get involved in the foster care system in the United States. I think that's a really neat thing to have in common. So when Jillana and I first met, she was encouraging. And one of the things I really took away is she said, there's enough work to be done in foster care that there should be many people involved in helping. So I hope that you're inspired by what she has to share to realize we need a lot of people to help in this space. So Jillana, why don't we start by you telling listeners about your family? I know you have both biological and adopted children.
I do. Well, first of all, it's so great to be here. I just already appreciate the conversation. So I have 5 kids who call me mom. I have my 3 boys all came to me via the foster care system, 2 of whom we legally adopted. And then we have 2 biological daughters. And I'm sure we'll get to it, but our very first child in foster care ever, Marcy, was named Royal, and he lived with us for a year in 1st grade. And we abruptly lost contact with him and were reunited 7 years ago when he was a 19-year-old young man. So even though there's no legal connection, we call him the son of our heart. He calls me mom. He calls my husband dad. We talk all the time. And for all intents and purposes, we are family to him and grandparents to his 3 kids.
Because family, it doesn't have to be a legal definition, right? That's just, yeah.
Exactly.
I'm excited to dig more into that because I think there's something there. I was recently talking with a young woman who aged out of the foster care system, and we were talking about our shared passion that you don't stop needing a family when you turn 18. Just because you age out of the system doesn't mean you don't need connection, people to celebrate things like graduations and marriage and holidays, right?
Exactly. Well, and I think too about how, I think about the fact that I have a child in college right now, and just the touch point, that soft place to land, right? Of going out into the world, and then also knowing that you have people that you can connect with and a place that you can be. And I just think we all need that. That's the foundation of connection and belonging that we all need. Like you said, it doesn't have an expiration date of well,
right.
It's 18, you no longer need that.
Right. And for me, I wasn't adopted. So I think I took that for granted, right? That, oh, I have that family and I have that soft place to land, like you just said. But when you don't have that, all of a sudden there's this huge disparity of, but wait, how come there's no one in the audience? The young woman was sharing, I didn't have anyone cheering for me at graduation. And I'm just
I know.
That's such a moment to be celebrated, right?
Exactly.
So with this shared passion, so I know, okay, your personal journey as a foster parent actually led you to start a nonprofit. Can you tell us about what led you originally into this work? And then what does your nonprofit do?
Yeah, the short answer to that is basically my husband and I returned from some work in Guatemala, and we turned to each other on the plane and rather naively asked each other, Marcy, like, well, where are the vulnerable children here? Because, I didn't know anybody to my knowledge. Of course, they were all around me. I just didn't see them or know them who was in foster care, who was foster parenting. So it was kind of, I knew the hazy concept of foster care, but I didn't really know anybody that had lived it. And so after working with vulnerable children at an orphanage in Central America, we were moving back to the States. My husband and I just said, we're the vulnerable children here. That led us straight to the doors of foster care and never really looked back after that point. We were privileged. This is kind of a funny story. We really thought that we would just kind of uh, ease in, but as many people know in this journey, there's really kind of like no easing in. It's more like a helicopter drop in the middle of the ocean.
Well said.
So whether that's foster care or adoption, right? It's like, oh,
Yeah.
there is a difference between taking, crisp notes in a journal, in a brand new journal, like, oh, this is how we should do things, and then like the lived reality of like what it looks like underneath the roof of your home. So
So good.
very quickly we were brought to our knees just in terms of feeling like, wow, we are in over our heads. There really is a difference here. Okay, so that was kind of our diving in to foster care. Fast forward, we moved from New York, where we were fostering, to Portland, Oregon. We had 2 young biological children. I had a really good relationship with my certifier, whose role was to come into our house every 180 days and just make sure we had a working fire extinguisher, and that everything was ready to go, safe, all of that. And I just asked her, what happens when kids are from whatever situation and they are waiting in the office for where they're going to go next? And she just painted this picture of scrambling each and every time. And I just thought, okay, well, there's so much about this scenario that's so out of my control. There's so much that's already gone awry in this precious one story to be at this point. But what could my community, faith community, public private sector, like what could we do to actually provide something tangible so that caseworkers aren't just digging into their own pockets for spare change to take kids through a McDonald's drive-through? Like, is there a space to step in? And the answer was yes. That the answer came in the form of a welcome box, which is basically a box full of a nightlight, a flashlight, snacks, art supplies, anything to occupy kids in this most vulnerable time of waiting. And I think the community really rallied behind the idea of helping rather a local child for a pretty low price point of about $25. And so that's initially what started this nonprofit, which that was never the plan. This was never supposed to be a nonprofit. I was happily teaching English as a second language at a community college here in Oregon. That's what I have my master's degree in. I didn't have any degree in anything with nonprofit management. And yet, as things often work through natural relationships and through meeting people, it's like you just take the next step and the next step and the next step. And to make a very long story short, Marcy, essentially there was a flood of community involvement through welcome boxes that led to people basically saying, okay, what else can I do? The state of the actual visitation rooms at the state agencies were pretty dismal and depressing. And so people were invited to come in and to make those spaces that communicated dignity and worth and value for these families. And then from there, there was an article that came out in our local paper entitled "A Revolution in Portland's Foster Care." And essentially we were like, this seems like it's a legit movement with a newspaper article behind it. Like, we need to name this thing. And so the name that was eventually chosen was Every Child. And there's a variety of things that Every Child does now. We are across the state of Oregon. We actually have been invited to expand nationally in some different jurisdictions, some other states. But really the heartbeat of what we are doing is trying to be a bridge between those that just want to get more involved, to those that have opportunities for involvement, be it serving with tangible needs, serving foster families, serving foster youth, volunteering in a variety of ways. We strive to be really intentional about the stories we're telling, which, as you know, is hard. Like in foster care and adoption, it's a mixed bag at best. And anybody who doesn't acknowledge just both the beauty along with the hard and the gut wrenching and all of it is just not being truthful about how tricky this is. You know, we live in such an Instagram world that I think sometimes I worry in this foster and adoption space, how things can be tidied up to fit inside a square or like a little pithy quote. And yet, you know, I think at the end of the day, many of us that have walked this road know this is worthy and it's difficult, but oftentimes the most worthy things in life are. And so we do a lot of different things, but I think in a nutshell, like that kind of embodies our heartbeat behind every child.
Yeah, you saw an opportunity and you kind of went and we're like, well, how can I help? Okay, so I know some of our listeners are brand new to any of this space. Some of them are like, I just want to help the kids, but I didn't know all this other stuff was going on. So Jillana, I wonder if we can like rewind. There's two particular scenarios. I wonder if you could just paint a little bit more for people that might be unfamiliar. So you mentioned these welcome kits. What was the scenario? Like if you were a kid going into the system, what was happening to you that this was a need?
Such a great question. I'm glad you asked that. So, you know, kids are often removed for the reasons of their parents are, you know, dealing with domestic violence, untreated mental illness, substance abuse. The state agency is not wanting to remove kids because that in and of itself is traumatic. And yet, if something rises to the level of like neglect or abuse, they do have to step in. When they do, the state is looking for a relative or somebody that child previously knows, or they turn to a stranger who is just like a general foster parent. Oftentimes, these things don't happen immediately where a child comes into care and all of a sudden that known relative is identified and they go immediately there. There's often this time of waiting. So really those welcome boxes, Marcy, are to occupy this like really vulnerable time of waiting where a child has just been removed from whatever situation, but they're sitting in a government office, not knowing where they're going, who they're going with. And so I think while a box doesn't solve a lick of their problems, I think to have oftentimes kids don't have a whole lot on them, sometimes just even the clothes on their back. So I think we can't underestimate the psychological importance of being like, okay, I don't know much about what's happening in my life right now, but I know that all of these beautiful brand new items are mine. And that's important.
And I have so something to do while I'm waiting because I'm in this sterile office. There's like all these adults around me and something negative probably happened. And now I don't know how to process all this. So I think that's a great glimpse to help people understand like the kids are taken out of these homes and then they're not like immediately necessarily driven across town. Like there's this awkward pause.
Yeah, there's an awkward pause. There's an awkward pause. And we have to think, you know, there are some kids that are able to verbally say, please take me to my aunt's house. Here's where she lives. But if a toddler is just found walking down the street and they're nonverbal, like the agency is starting from scratch in terms of doing detective work to figure out who is this child? Who are they? You know, who do they belong to? And how do we keep them safe? Hopefully with somebody that's, you know, known to them, but that's not immediate. And so that's where these welcome boxes kind of fill in the gap.
I think our listeners are like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that, but I think that really helps paint the picture. And the other piece in that story that you shared related to like visits and social services. So I know with my kids, we had this 18-month kind of runway before we could go file for the adoption. And we did some social service visits at a building. And I don't know that our listeners are all familiar with how this works. So you might want to start, Jillana, with like visitation in general and like what exactly is going on at these offices maybe don't feel warm and fuzzy.
Yes, no, that's such a great thing. You know, I know in Oregon, there's really a concentrated effort and I need to get with the times in using the word family time. They're really wanting to go away from the term visitation, even though I know you just use that because that's like a jail type, you know, correctional facility term visitation. But family time. So, you know, you think about a parent kind of being in the pit of their addiction, so to speak, and they are granted, a child cannot come in to the foster care system without a judge or a referee signing off on that. So it's not just like a willy-nilly, a one caseworker's decision. It's like, yes, it's a decision of a state agency along with a judge that's providing oversight. A plan will be put in place for that parent to mitigate whatever safety risks initially led to their child being involved in foster care to begin with. And part of their court-ordered services is to spend family time with their kids. And oftentimes those family time visits are taking place at these very sterile government offices where there's, maybe a few rooms where there's like one-way glass where a caseworker can be on one side and, they can be engaging in with their kids. But oftentimes these spaces leave a lot to be desired. They're just not inspiring spaces. And we really wanted to say, gosh, wouldn't it be amazing? You think about how much life is lived in 24 hours a day. You stretch that out to 7 days a week. And then you think, if you could only see your precious kids for 1 hour a week, what is the setting that you would want that to take place in? And I don't think anybody would be like, my first choice is a government office. So, and in that light of that reality, it's like, how can we make these spaces warm and inviting and inspiring so that parents can say, gosh, hopefully, when I get healthy again, I can create a space for my family that looks like this space. And so that's really, just that encouragement that like, we see you, we support you. And our organization has rallied volunteers. And when I say this, I want to be really clear, Marcy. It's not like we're sitting on this huge pot of money and just digging into our pockets and deciding to make over. Like this is really a story, like you said at the very beginning, of people kind of leaning in and giving what they have to give. And all of those acts adding up to something collectively that is so much bigger than what one person could offer in and of itself. So for example,
we're making the room like more warm and friendly. And because to your point, like for listeners that may not know, like the reason why those visits happen at social services, and Jillana kind of alluded to this, is the supervision part of that the parent is not safe with this child and they're kind of earning back that trust or trying to earn back that trust. And so that's the why they need to be there with a state worker, but it's not the friendliest, happiest room in the world. So
it's not. And, I don't want to make this sound like it's Pollyanna. It's like a rainbow mural and like lovely toys is not going to somehow transform them to like, wow, I had no idea I was still at a government office. And yet at the same time, I think a lot of times things that are seemingly small just add up to be, bigger things. Yeah. And a lot of these parents, unfortunately, that are visiting with their kids, there is a darn good chance that they may have been visiting with their parents, a decade earlier, because unfortunately it is very cyclical to trauma.
Yeah. But I think you're giving us all ideas and like, could I do that? Or I didn't know that it was a thing. I wonder if, my friend that works at that office needs some help, or I wonder if my group in the community could do that. So those are great insights to understand. So I know, kind of pivoting topics, some of our listeners are currently waiting for that 6-month mark or 3-month mark, because every state's a little bit different, to legally adopt children that they're caring for. And many of them already live together and they're deemed a foster family until the adoption hearing. I'm curious, knowing what you know, living what you've lived, what type of support do you find these families most often need? And then if you were one of these families, what type of support would you encourage them to go seek out?
Well, I would encourage them to debunk the myth that they are completely self-sufficient. I think oftentimes there can be this feeling of like, I signed up for this. I don't want to rely on anybody else because this is my choice. And yet I think that one of the most humbling things that foster care and adoption has invited me to discover is that there is nobody that supersedes needing community on this journey, and that really that there is a strength in the humility of saying, I need others to walk alongside me. So to answer your question, I think that, there's kind of two different buckets of help that people can receive. I think one, there is that emotional support, that relatability, that I get it factor. And, another foster or adoptive parent is going to be able to have immediate relatability. You can switch out kind of exact details, but the common denominators in our kids' stories of something going terribly awry to need to have a new family. There's a lot of relatability in that. And I think that there's something so beautiful in
seeking out support groups, seeking out podcasts like this that can encourage you in the journey, where you can continue to be educated and continue to be around people that have that I get it factor. So I think that's one bucket of support. And I think the second is really that tangible support. And I think that tangible support is really an opportunity for people to think critically about who's in their lives. And they might not have that I get it factor, but that's okay. We can't all be all things to all people. And so, is there a group that that you would be willing to have, drop a coffee cart off, or mow your lawn, or, check in with you about if like a casserole can be left on your front porch or what have you, and kind of meet some of those tangible goods. Because I think one of the biggest mistakes I made, Marcy, when I was fostering and later adopted my son, was feeling like, well, I've done this before. Like, I can do this. Like, I'm self-sufficient. I can do this. And realizing that I was robbing people of an opportunity to really come alongside and to be part of a story that's larger than themselves. And so I think, we have to be wise. We have to be practical. We can't let everybody in an inner circle. I'm certainly not saying that. We need to be discerning about who those people are and how much we're extending of themselves, because ultimately it's not about them, it's about the child, right? But I think what we can do to just keep our focus on that child, especially when they are freshly home, and not be distracted with things that other people can do. So I think what's one of the hardest things is people kind of say like, well, let me know if you need any help. And that's hard because it puts the onus on us to kind of circle around. But I would really encourage folks in this critical time of waiting to begin to just say, gosh, it's really not a matter of if the going gets tough, but when. And I don't say that to be daunting. I just say that to be practical, at least in my own experience. So I would really encourage people to think about like who can support you emotionally and who can support you tangibly. And I think it takes a lot of courage to debunk the myth that we can go it all alone. Like, we are going to need people on this journey, because in my personal experience, it's not really a matter of like, if the going gets tough, when the going gets tough. So I share that not to be daunting, but just to be blunt, that there's really a sign of strength in the humility to say, you know what, I don't want to be 100% self-sufficient, because that's lonely in this journey. And I do believe that our family needs to be uplifted and needs to be propped up. And so you asked me a while back to let you know and how I can help. And I'm here to just say, if you're really genuinely willing, here's a few tangible things that I could use.
Which is so practical, right? Like we people just, and I had that in my own experience. People didn't know how to help. And so I had to kind of, you just, they don't know and you don't know, and you got to just like take the minute. And for me, it was making a list and saying, here are the items I need, or here's how to help with this. But no, I don't want you to take childcare for my kids, because I want to spend time with the kids. So like some things are going to be a little more protective over, just because of the nature of what we're involved in. But those are really, really great tips, Jillana. Some of our listeners are thinking about going through the licensing process and getting involved in the foster care system, but I often hear that they're a little uneasy about having the right support system, whether it's friends, family, extended family, work, things like that, to actually get involved. And I'm curious what advice you have for these types of individuals and families, and where you would point them to find that support.
I think one of the best things that one can do when they're considering foster parenting is to talk to people that are currently living it. I think so oftentimes, both in the world of foster care and adoption, we often have these ideas of what it will be like, and then we have a daily lived reality that may not fit with like what we initially thought the picture looked like. And so I think the more that we can educate ourselves by talking with people who are living it day in, day out underneath the roofs of their homes, I think that's one of the very best things we can do. If you don't know anyone, whatever agency you're considering going through, you can ask to speak with somebody, ask for a referral to talk with a current foster family. I know our organization offers these 90-minute sessions where we invite people that are living the journey, both veteran foster parents as well as people that have just started out, across a whole lot of different experiences in terms of the kids they take and the ages and the
the needs and and we just invite people to come and listen and then to ask their own questions. And so if you don't have an opportunity like that nearby, I think you can call an agency and ask directly to speak with someone. I think it's also a really wise idea, Marcy, for people to just kind of try to be those tangible support people to another foster family potentially. And it's not, meaning that like you would drop off a coffee on somebody's front porch and then know everything you need to know about foster care. But I think that for foster parents, we're all, life is full for all of us. But I think for those are genuinely displaying an earnest intention to want to like learn more, people respond to that. And I think, the kind of like, so how is foster care, on the fly at the grocery store, like that's not the time or the place to really have an honest exchange. But I've found that most people that have been fostering, if they see that somebody is genuine, really want to connect. And people will offer a variety of different advice. And again, we have to take into account that that's just one family's experience. But I think that that's a really wise place to start, is through listening. If you don't know anyone, there's some really good books, some memoirs, a lot of different things, that you can do to kind of begin to self-educate. But I think at the end of the day, you really do need to know some people that are truly living it in the flesh, despite all the education that you can do.
Yeah, because it makes it real. And yeah, I definitely had those mentors that I could text at the most random of hours with the most random of things. And like to your saying, like they were doing it and it was normal. And, I could probably have just asked a random person, but to ask someone really living in this space, it's a very different kind of advice for that. And so, all right, a little bit of a different audience. Some of us listening already have experience caring for children in foster care. And I'm wondering what strengths you think those of us have that we could use to encourage or mentor, support others who might be thinking about this. Because we all have a story. We all have an ability to leverage our own experience to help other people kind of take this path. So I'm curious how you would kind of activate us.
Such a good question, Marcy. I think I would just come back to just feeling like we all don't have to do the same thing, but we all are equipped to do something. And so, I think one of the common denominators across our nation is that I don't personally know of any community that's like, whoa, we're flush and foster parents. So like nobody's needed here. That just seems to be a sad common denominator, that there is a crisis lack. Does that mean that a family should automatically be a foster family? Absolutely not. Fostering is difficult. You need to make sure that you yourself have processed a lot of your own background story. If you are partnered, you need to make sure that your marriage is in a solid place. And if you have biological children, it's not just a decision that the parents make. It really needs to be a family decision with like some buy-in as well. So there's a lot of beautiful things I can share about what I feel like foster care has given to my children. I have story after story of how I feel like they see kids and they see people and they see situations with so much texture that I never had at their age. There is something that is just so beautiful about hearing from another mom about, one of my children, seeing her child on the first day of school, sitting alone and going up and sitting next to them. Like, I have to believe that like there have been some really beautiful character shaping aspects of foster care. And also, I don't want to gloss over that some of those things have come at a very high price. And so we can't always choose the way that our families are going to be. And so, like, again, I return to some of the most difficult things are often the most worthy things. So, our family has journeyed down this path, but I would say to folks, listen well, see what you uniquely have to give, and walk that path. And there is a crisis lack. There will always be need for more foster parents. And I'm never going to shine away from shining a spotlight on that reality. Like, it definitely is for more people, Marcy, than are currently doing it. And also, I feel protective of families stepping into the space in a healthy way that's not going to sink them. And so I think that we just have to walk that tightrope of both and.
Right. Are you the kind of family for this, or is this just something for you to pass along? Because I think we all can do that. We all can be aware and informed, and we know people that would be great for this, or we can identify not right now or not me ever. And I think those are really good realities. Okay, so you kind of alluded to earlier, there's plenty of books in this space. I've got some books in this space. You've got 2 books in this space. Tell us about those. What's the heart behind your 2 different titles?
Yeah, in 2019, I was privileged to publish a book called No Sugarcoating. And that book was really based off of those coffee houses that I was telling you about, where we invite people to come and listen to the real life experience of those that have been fostering. And after years and years of facilitating these meetings, which are always so exciting because they were always different, people always shared a little different of their snippet of their story, people always engaged differently. I just felt like, man, this is a really good start, but I have something more to say here. And so this is really this pithy book, Marcy, that I wish somebody had honestly handed me 20 years ago when I started my fostering journey and just said, Jillana, here are just some flyby truths of how fostering is going to change your life, both practically and emotionally. It's not, this is going to take an hour to read. It's almost like a primer for a prospective foster parent. So that was No Sugarcoating in 2019. In June of 2022, I published a memoir called A Love Stretched Life. And that's really the story behind the story about how I've been changed in proximity to people who have really different stories than me, and how foster care and adoption has been a huge transformative lens on my life. And in A Love Stretched Life, I share the story of Royal, who I just touched on, our very first foster child. I share the story of having a 15-year relationship with one of my adopted son's first mother, so 15 years and counting, through foster care, through adoption. And I share the story of saying yes to a baby born at the hospital, who is now my son, and that journey looking dramatically differently than what I had initially thought, just due to his in utero substance exposure. And so it's all kind of falls under the title of A Love Stretched Life, because I have been stretched. I feel like I am really grateful for the life that's mine, and my life would look totally different if foster care and adoption hadn't been a huge part of it.
And yet your training is in this other thing. It's interesting how that happens to us, right? I'm like, my day job is not what I do by this side thing. And it's interesting when we just say yes and see a need. And my pastor often says, like, see a need, meet a need. And it's really that simple, right? You just are like, I'm willing to kind of jump in here. And so as we close, Jillana, I'm wondering, where would you guide our listeners to find you, to find your resources?
Yeah, your listeners can find me at JillanaGoble.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. I'm not super active on Instagram. It's a little bit of a weakness of mine, that I try to be really boundaried with how much I'm looking at other people's lives when I'm barely living my own sometimes.
Sure, it's healthy.
Yeah. But JillanaGoble.com, and then those 2 resources that I mentioned are available on Amazon and other places where books are sold.
So good. Listeners, I hope you've really enjoyed getting to understand a few different nuances in this space that are just daily realities to kids that are kind of brought into the system. And I hope that hearing Jillana's story, especially on the foster parent side, and what she's gone through and how she's trying to help other families feel supported in that process, I hope that it helps you feel a little bit more supported to get support, or to ask for help, or to provide that support to others. So Jillana, we've really learned a lot from you, and I want to thank you so much for sharing your heart with us.
Well, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to talk with you.
Listeners, did you know that you've helped the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast rank in the top 30% most followed podcasts on Spotify? You are helping waiting children be seen, and you're teaching our nation how to adopt these children. You can help this podcast reach more future adoptive parents by leaving a review and continuing to share this podcast with others. You can even help others know that instead of Googling to try to figure out how to adopt, they should go to ForgottenAdoptionOption.com, where they can learn the step-by-step process, tips for enduring the journey, and I even have a children's book to celebrate the forever families all around us. It means so much that you took the time to listen to this episode. And on behalf of the 113,000 children who each has a name, a story, and dreams, and deserves to grow up experiencing the love and support that is found in a forever family, I thank you so much for caring.